I never liked how silence could stretch itself around something sharp and still pretend to be soft. It was late afternoon when I saw the photo. I hadn't been looking for anything. I was scrolling out of habit, out of muscle memory more than intention. The image came up secondhand, reposted by someone who wasn't supposed to matter. A long dining table, gold-rimmed plates, linen napkins folded with care, and in the center a honey-glazed ham on the same platter I gave my mother 6 Christmases ago. The caption read, "Nothing more whole than a full table. Family is everything." It was signed with a red heart and the username of my cousin Jessica Finley. My name wasn't tagged, neither was I in any of the replies. I zoomed in without meaning to. I could see the corner of the living room behind the table, the pale green walls, the same lamp, with the floral shade still crooked. The photos on the mantel hadn't changed. Not even the frame with the scratch on the glass, the one that used to hold a picture of me and Logan at the lake. That frame was still there, but the photo was new. A group shot. I wasn't in it. I opened the family email thread. Nothing since 3 weeks ago. A forwarded chain about recipes for sushing. No greeting. No personal notes. I scrolled through the group chat next. Dozens of messages, jokes, links, reminders about who's bringing what. My name hadn't appeared since early February. A thumbs-up emoji. That was it. When I called my mother, the line went straight to voicemail. Not even the ring. Just her voice, clean and practiced. "You've reached Diane Whitman. I'm unavailable at the moment. Please leave a message." I didn't. Instead, I made tea, sat on the floor, and reread a post-it I'd stuck to the side of the fridge. In my handwriting block letters, "You don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt when they've already cashed it." The mug I was holding still had a faint chip near the handle, barely visible, but I ran my thumb over it, out of habit. It used to belong to my grandmother. She said the floor made it easier to grip, like pain had texture, and once it became familiar, it gave you leverage. An hour passed. My phone buzzed only once. It was a message from Eleanor. "Don't take it to heart, sweetheart. Maybe they're just not ready." No mention of what it was, no names, but it didn't need them. I read it twice, then turned off the screen and placed the phone face down. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I didn't stand up and storm out of the room like someone on television. Instead, I sat with the tea until it went cold. The house creaked once in the hallway, the kind of sound you only notice when you're waiting for someone who won't knock. I thought about the dish in that photo, the one on the table. Roasted butternut squash with sage and cranberries. That had been mine. I'd started bringing it the year Logan forgot the stuffing, and Mom pretended not to notice. I'd brought it every year after. I never heard anyone compliment it, but they always ate it. The plate always came back empty. I hadn't made it last year. No one asked why. I remember once a few years back, I told my mother I was thinking of applying for an overseas logistics assignment. She was stirring soup on the stove and barely looked up. "That kind of thing doesn't leave a lot of room for family, Rachel. Some of us still believe in being present." I had nodded like I agreed. There was always that tone, polite, measured, but lined with frost. Like everything she said had been left too long in the fridge. Later that evening, I opened the drawer in the side table by the front door. Inside, I kept a small metal box, flat silver, the size of an old cigar case. Inside that, an envelope with my birth certificate, a receipt for the last car payment I made on the vehicle Logan now drove, and a small gold pin. The pin was shaped like a pair of wings, my first commendation back when I still thought recognition would fix things. I held it between 2 fingers and stared. The edges had dulled. It used to shine. When I gave it to my father to hold on to for safekeeping, he'd tucked it into a drawer and forgotten. I found it last year, buried under unpaid bills and warranty offers addressed to my brother. I put it back in the box and closed the lid. I didn't text Eleanor again. I didn't send anything to anyone. I didn't write some clever reply in the group chat or scroll back far enough to convince myself I'd missed something. I had not been forgotten. I had been erased slowly, elegantly, without confrontation. The table was full, and I had not been asked to bring a chair. And somehow that was worse than being told to leave. I learned early that people reward you most when you make things easier for them. When Logan missed the deadline for his scholarship essay, I offered to let him use mine. It was already done 3 weeks ahead of schedule, printed on linen paper with footnotes and margins. He didn't ask. I just left it on his desk and walked away. 2 months later, he got the grant. At dinner, Mom clinked her glass and called him resilient. I clapped like everyone else. Once I drove 2 hours on a Tuesday just to drop off a birthday cake for Aunt Susan. She wasn't home. I left it on her porch with a note tucked under the ribbon. The icing had slid off by the time she got it, and she never mentioned it. The next week, she posted a picture of a new bouquet from Jessica with the caption, "Thoughtful surprises make life sweet." I didn't comment. There was a stretch of time when I sent postcards to Grandma Eleanor every 2 weeks. She doesn't use apps, doesn't like screens. So I wrote longhand neat lines on floral stationery. I told her about drills, about my roommate's habit of talking in her sleep, about how I started liking the quiet just before sunrise. She kept them all in a box beneath her bed. I only found out because she showed me, once proud but quiet, the way some people show bruises they're not ashamed of. No one else in the family ever mentioned the letters. At one Thanksgiving, Dad turned to me with his wine glass half raised. Maybe leave the military talk out of dinner this time. Not everyone enjoys hearing about weapons logistics. I nodded. I hadn't brought it up. Another time, Mom pulled me aside in the hallway. Her bracelet clinked against the doorframe as she crossed her arms. "Don't talk about deployments with the kids around. It makes you sound hard." She didn't say too hard. She didn't need to. I once asked her quietly, carefully about the monthly allowance Dad claimed he'd been sending me through her. I hadn't seen $1 in 3 months. She leaned over the sink, rinsing a wine glass. "Maybe be grateful you're getting anything at all. You know your brother's struggling. Or have you forgotten how family works? I forgot how to respond." That was easier. The only time I raised my voice, if you could call it, that was 3 years ago. We were sitting around the table after dinner. There was candle wax hardened into the table runner, and Logan was talking about starting a new business with a friend from recovery. No one asked questions. No one mentioned that he hadn't worked in almost a year. I said one thing. "I don't think it's right that my college account was emptied. It wasn't a family emergency. It was mine." There was a long pause. Then Jessica dropped her fork loudly, like on cue. Aunt Susan cleared her throat. Dad reached for the remote and muted the TV, though no one had been watching. Mom looked at me without blinking. "Rachel, this isn't the time. We're trying to enjoy the evening. Don't start something you'll regret." I didn't respond. No one else did either. The conversation turned to holiday plans. No one circled back. I didn't bring it up again. After that, I learned how to lean out of the frame, send the card, skip the visit, respond with, "Hope you're well," instead of, "That hurt." It wasn't that I gave up. I just adjusted the volume to match the room. You can still participate if you whisper. Sometimes I'd spend hours choosing a gift for a cousin's graduation, only to see them thank everyone publicly, except me. Other times I'd comment on family group photos, only to get a heart emoji from someone who hadn't seen me in 2 years. When I passed my qualifying officer's exam and shared the news in the chat, no one responded. Logan sent a meme 3 hours later. Everyone reacted to that. I still remember the jacket I wore the day I moved into my first off-base apartment. Worn denim sleeves rolled twice, one thread pulled loose near the cuff. I hung it on the chair beside me and waited to feel like an adult. Instead, I spent 20 minutes peeling the sticker off the bottom of a new mug. Mom never called. Dad texted proud of you with a waving hand emoji. No punctuation. I replied, thanks. That was the whole exchange, okay? Some nights I still do that thing where I draft long messages and then delete them before sending. Not out of fear, not exactly. It's more like standing at the edge of a swimming pool and knowing the water won't catch you. There's a drawer in my kitchen with extra batteries, rubber bands, and a card addressed to the daughter who understands. It's unsigned. I don't know who wrote it. I found it slipped into a bag during a family reunion years ago. I kept it, maybe because I wanted to believe someone meant it. Maybe because part of me still thinks understanding should count for something. I don't speak much in family photos anymore. You learn eventually that being quiet isn't always silence. It's self-preservation, folded into good posture. Some absences don't echo. They just settle into you like silt. Fine and quiet. The last Christmas card I got from the family came in a thick envelope with glitter pressed into the corners. Inside were folded notes from different relatives, signed by hand, each addressed to someone specific. One to Logan, one to Jessica, one to the little twins, and one that read simply, to our wonderful nieces and nephews. No name. Just the category. Like I'd become a footnote to the group. I left the envelope unopened for a week, then finally slid the contents out and tucked them into the back of a drawer behind old utility bills and expired coupons. I didn't throw them away. I just didn't want them within reach. There's a small chip on the edge of my desk. It came from moving the furniture too many times, trying to make a space feel more like mine. I catch myself running my finger across it whenever I need to keep still. It's a habit I don't break, especially during phone calls. When Logan failed out of college the first time, I remember Mom folding laundry at the kitchen table, smoothing his sweatshirts like they were made of something breakable. "He's under a lot of pressure," she said. "Transitions are hard for boys." A few years later, I didn't pass the first round of interviews for a civilian job I wanted. I told her quietly, off-handedly, almost like I was testing the weight of my own disappointment. She didn't pause. "Maybe you've been aiming at the wrong things. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of path." I didn't argue. I nodded like I understood, like I always did. Logan's first car had a big red bow on top. There was a photo on Facebook with the caption, "He deserves a fresh start. So proud of our boy." I remember because it came the same week I was awarded my first commendation medal. I'd sent a picture of it in the family chat, just the ribbon and the clasp, nothing boastful. No one replied. Later, Aunt Susan posted a photo of Logan holding his new license and wrote, "Big steps for the next generation. I never mentioned my medal again." It became a pattern. Anytime something good happened, I weighed it before I shared, held it up to the light like a fragile object. Would this be seen as showing off? Would it be ignored? Or worse, dismissed? When I was selected to help lead a training unit for incoming cadets, I mentioned it to my father during a call. The line crackled faintly in the background. He cleared his throat. "Leadership's a heavy load. Make sure you're not stretching yourself thin." I watched the shadow of my own hand on the wall as he spoke. It didn't even look like mine. During family dinners, I got used to listening. I'd refill water glasses, gather empty dishes, and nod when people talked over each other. Once Logan interrupted me mid-sentence and told a story about some girl he met at a gas station. No one noticed I hadn't finished my thought. Jessica laughed so hard, she spilled her wine. Later that night, Mom caught me in the hallway near the coat rack. "You don't need to insert yourself all the time," she murmured. "You're already doing fine. Let others have the space." It wasn't said with cruelty. It was said like a piece of advice, the kind given to someone who should know better. So, I got better at stepping aside, at becoming the person people remembered last. Birthdays passed. I sent cards. I marked anniversaries, job promotions, small milestones for cousins I barely saw. I wrote, "So, happy for you, and you're doing great, even when the updates were so small." I sent Logan a message once when I heard he'd relapsed. No reply. Weeks later, Mom posted a picture of him at a bonfire captioned, "Getting stronger every day." I took a screenshot and deleted it the same night. When I moved into a small apartment off base, I invited them to visit. Only Eleanor came. She brought a jar of peach jam and a pair of socks she'd knitted herself. The cuffs were uneven, but they fit. As she sat in the kitchen sipping tea, she looked around and said, "Everything here has a place. That's rare." I remember thinking, I don't. Not in their house. Not anymore. There was a blue folder in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Old report cards, copies of performance reviews, a thank you note from a former supervisor, written on stiff paper. I kept them not for pride, but to remind myself I hadn't imagined my own progress. No one ever asked to see them. The last time I attended a family barbecue, someone handed me a paper plate before I'd even taken off my coat. "We've already got a spot for you," they said. The seat was at the edge of the patio next to a folding chair with a broken armrest. Across the lawn, Logan was on the porch swing, surrounded by 3 aunts and a cooler of beer someone had brought just for him. I sat down. The chair tilted slightly. No one noticed. It became easier to speak in neutral tones. To choose. "I'm keeping busy over anything real." People liked me better that way, predictable, contained. I made them comfortable by making myself smaller. The first time I told someone I'd stopped sharing news with my family, they looked at me like I was giving up. But I wasn't retreating. I was recognizing the difference between quiet and absence. Some people disappear loudly. Others are erased in lowercase. I learned to read the margins before I looked for meaning in the center. Some truths don't land like thunder. They settle slow, soundless like dust you didn't notice. The folder Eleanor handed me had a soft bend at the spine, as if it had been opened too many times and always closed too gently. She didn't knit beside me. She stayed across the table near the sink, fingers resting on the rim of her mug. Like they inside the folder, the numbers were clean and clinical. Dates, transaction codes, repeated notes in small black font. S12T. She didn't ask if I wanted to see it. She just placed it in front of me the way people I stared at the paper longer than necessary. Not because I didn't understand, but because the account had been in my name. I remembered signing the initial form's scholarship documents, some tuition support, a modest buffer. Eleanor had insisted on managing it quietly, without making me feel beholden. But somewhere I traced a line under one entry. The note read, "Emergency aid, R. Whitman, struggling with school stress." My hands stayed still, palms flat on the wood table, close, but she told me you'd asked her not to worry. Eleanor's voice cut through gently, as if explaining someone else's misunderstanding. That you didn't want me involved because you were embarrassed. That Logan was helping cover your rent while you focused on recovery. I looked up briefly. She wasn't crying, just watching me like someone who'd just remembered they left the stove on. I didn't correct her. I didn't ask what recovery meant in that context. There was no version of this story where my brother was paying for anything. He couldn't even keep a phone charged. Eleanor lowered her hand to the table and tapped the folder once. I believed her. She said you didn't want to talk about it, that you needed space, not judgment. I didn't speak. The silence wasn't new. It fit. I opened my banking app. My balance blinked back at me $4.21. No rent due, no groceries. Bought, no sign of invisible help. Just a balance low enough to feel personal. Last week I had eaten crackers and peanut butter 3 nights in a row. I'd stretched the last of my laundry soap by adding water to the bottle and shaking it. I hadn't mentioned this to anyone. There was no point. The folder stayed open. I closed it slowly, aligning the edges with care. Like precision could make the contents more manageable. Eleanor pulled a chair back but didn't sit. I thought maybe she had your permission, that you were just too proud to say something. Pride was never the problem. Access was. Mom used to say things like, "Don't make a fuss about what can't be undone," right after making a decision without asking. When I was 16, she signed my name on a library late fee notice so I could learn responsibility. When I questioned it, she held up the receipt and smiled. "You'll thank me when you're older." When Logan lost his job for the 3rd time, she told the extended family he had stepped back for mental health reasons. When I worked 2 jobs during undergrad, she told people I couldn't figure out what I wanted yet. They weren't lies exactly, just retellings that removed me from the center of my own story. Eleanor finally sat not across from me, but beside. She told me you were unstable, that Logan was the one making sure your bills got paid. I didn't want to believe it, but her voice trailed off into her tea. No one ever wants to believe their daughter could lie with that much ease, but Diane always did it with language so smooth it felt like care. Last month she'd texted, "If you're still struggling, just say so. We've been trying to support you even if it's not in the way you imagined." At the time, I didn't know what she meant. Now, I did. I remembered once years ago when I got a call about an overdue utility bill under my name. I hadn't opened the account. Mom told me it was just to get things processed faster. You know how paperwork works. You're smart enough to let that go. Let that go. That line that lived in my head like static. Eleanor reached across the table, not to touch me, but to push the folder slightly closer. I wanted you to see it from me, not later, not when it's too late to ask questions. There were no questions left, just a narrowing. It was never just about the money. It was about the rerouting. The way my name had become a tool in someone else's narrative. The way need had been manufactured, justified and weaponized, without ever being mine. I thought about the phrase support for you and wondered how many lies you had to stack before theft became protection in someone else's mouth. I didn't feel betrayal, not in the way people expect. No fire, no heat. Just the soft, dull recognition that I had not been forgotten, I had been repurposed. I didn't speak as I left the folder untouched. Sometimes silence isn't the absence of words. It's what fills the space after truth arrives without apology. There's a difference between leaving and disappearing. One makes noise. The other doesn't ask for permission. I folded the windbreaker carefully, tucking the sleeves inward so they wouldn't snag. It had belonged to Eleanor's late husband, worn thin at the cuffs, navy blue, fading into grey. She offered it without fanfare. No stories, no sentiment, just held it out like a fact. I didn't resist. I took it, and that was enough. The closet still held boxes from my early 20s college notebooks, a shoebox of letters, a faded sweatshirt with the emblem of a camp I barely remembered. I looked at each item once. I didn't open anything. I zipped the bag shut without a second glance. If something was worth keeping, I would have needed it already. Eleanor didn't hover. She moved slowly around the kitchen, rinsing dishes that had already been clean. The light over the stove buzzed softly, the sound barely there, like something that had grown tired of being noticed. "Your mother came by last week," she said, not turning around. She didn't knock, just left a folder on the bench. I didn't ask what was in it. She wrote, "I hope you understand. We did what we had to do." Her voice was even, not bitter. No apology. Just that. I nodded. Nothing needed to be said in return. Later that afternoon, I logged into the group chat. The name of it hadn't changed. Whitman's Circle. Still 17 members. Still a profile photo from the family picnic 5 years ago. Logan in the center, holding a sparkler. I clicked mute, then leave conversation. No confirmation message popped up, just a quiet blink, then the screen returned to my inbox. Clean. Next was Facebook. I didn't delete anyone. I unfollowed them one by one. Logan, Diane, my aunts, cousins, second cousins, even Jessica, the people who had sent emojis on birthdays but never asked why I missed Thanksgiving, people who shared throwbacks labeled hushed family first and never noticed who was no longer tagged. My feed went blank in less than a minute. I changed the password to the email I'd once used for financial aid forms, an account my father had access to during my college years, just in case he'd said once after forgetting a login. I never changed it back, until now. The new password had no names, no numbers tied to birthdays or anniversaries, just a string of letters I wouldn't forget, and no one else could guess. Eleanor placed an envelope on the counter. A blank check inside. No amount written. "If you'd like, we can open something in your name," she said softly. "Only yours. No one else touches it." I didn't speak. I just nodded once, like sealing an agreement that didn't require paper. That night, I scrolled through old photos in my phone, not to reminisce, but to delete. Screenshots of birthday texts that now felt scripted. Group pictures where I'd been placed at the edge holding someone's coat or someone's child. Posts my mother had made tagging me in captions like, "So proud of our girl even when she's too busy to visit." I archived them all, not out of spite, just clarity. A message from Logan showed up around midnight. "Mom says you're being dramatic. Just take a breath." I didn't reply. I deleted the thread and blocked the number. If there was a breath to take, I'd already held it too long. Once when I was 9, I had tried to leave a note on the fridge after a fight with Logan. A scribbled apology in crayon. "Sorry. I don't want us to be mad forever." I found it torn in half the next day, stuffed behind the silverware drawer. I didn't write notes anymore. The next morning, I folded a worn-out t-shirt into the bottom of my bag. It had paint specks on the hem, and a tiny hole under the right sleeve too faded to wear, but too familiar to throw out. Not because it meant anything, but because it reminded me of what didn't. I left the room just as I found it neat, unburdened. I didn't take pictures. I didn't linger. Eleanor walked me to the porch, her cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. "You don't have to explain," she said, adjusting the sleeve of my jacket. "Sometimes walking away is the only honest thing left to do." I didn't hug her. I didn't promise to call. We understood things differently now, without ceremony. As I turned to go, she added, "If they call, I won't answer on your behalf." That was the most generous thing that anyone had given me in a long time. I didn't tell her thank you. I just let the door close behind me without sound. Some exits don't slam. They click shut. And that quiet, unremarkable sound can be the start of everything. Some kinds of quiet don't ask for permission. They just arrive and wait to see if you notice. The walls in the new room weren't white. They were a sort of uncertain beige old paint layered over older intentions. A faint water stain curved above the window like a forgotten fingerprint. The ceiling fan ticked on low, never spinning fast enough to matter. I didn't hang anything. Not at first. I kept my bag in the corner zipped as if unpacking might imply I planned to stay. But by the second night, I laid the grey sheet set across the mattress. I had bought it myself, not because it was on sale, not because someone suggested the colour, not because I needed to match a guest room, just grey, just mine. The floor creaked in the places you'd expect. One board near the closet sang a little louder. I didn't mind. It felt honest. The first morning I made instant coffee in a chipped mug I found on the shared kitchen shelf. The handle had a small crack near the base. I held it carefully like it might teach me something. There was a moment barely noticeable where I didn't reach for my phone. No silent urge to check for missed messages. No habit of waiting to be summoned. My hand hovered over the table, instead flat against the wood, absorbing the way stillness settled into my palms. Breakfast was dry toast and one boiled egg. I ate sitting on the floor because I hadn't moved the chair yet. Nothing about it felt temporary. It just felt unobserved. There's a strange kind of freedom in eating, without having to explain where your appetite went. Later that week, I wrote something small on a piece of printer paper and taped it beside the mirror. This place belongs to someone who fought to feel safe. The tape didn't hold well on the first try. I smoothed the edges down twice before it stuck. Someone in the hallway played music loud enough for the bass to hum through the walls. I didn't knock. I didn't move. I just let it play through the parts of me that used to flinch at intrusion. I hadn't told anyone I'd changed addresses. The old group chat had gone silent on my end. The last message was from Logan. "We'll be here if you calm down." I'd left it unread. There was nothing left to calm. At the laundromat across the street, I sat on the plastic bench and watched my clothes tumble in uneven rhythm. The windbreaker Eleanor gave me was inside, zip-doored up. I almost pulled it out to hand wash instead, but then I let it go. It had been worn too many times for caution to matter. There was a woman 2 machines down, folding socks with the kind of precision that looked like habit, not effort. She caught my eye once, nodded slightly, then returned to her task. We didn't speak. That, too, felt like a form of respect. I didn't miss anyone. That word miss implied something intact had been misplaced. But nothing was missing. It had all been accounted for, just misplaced inside other people's stories. A letter from the department arrived that week. Nothing urgent, just standard personnel paperwork. I filled it out in pen, not pencil. Signed my name slowly. I used to loop the R in Rachel with a small flourish, a kind of unconscious softness. I didn't do that this time. The pen moved clean, the edges sharp. The windbreaker now hung from a single hook behind the door. I hadn't worn it since the move. It didn't smell like Eleanor anymore. It smelled like soap and something neutral, something that didn't belong to anyone else. I made a rule: 1 dish, 1 glass, 1 fork. I didn't want drawers of things I didn't use. I didn't want the quiet clutter of preparing for company who wouldn't come. A voicemail from my father sat in my inbox for 2 days before I listened. Rachel, I don't know what this is about. We've always tried to do our best by you. Your mother's hurt. Maybe you should consider how this looks. Not how it feels. How it looks. I deleted it after the 3rd sentence. No reply, no reaction, just a small moment of space where something used to take root and no longer could. I used to feel the need to explain silence. Now I let it sit beside me companionably. At the end of the week, I rearranged the 2 books I'd brought. 1 on the windowsill, 1 on the small shelf beside the bed. Neither of them had been recommended by anyone. I hadn't borrowed them. I didn't owe their meaning to someone else. That was new. On a whim, I bought a candle from a street vendor. The scent was something called early fog, though I didn't know what that meant. I lit it that night, not for ambiance, but for proof. Smoke curled upward thin and unashamed. I sat with it until it burned out. Not all beginnings start with a door opening. Some begin in the middle of a room in the soundless recognition that no one is watching, and that finally is a kind of peace. There's a quiet in being forgotten that's different from being alone. One strips you bare, the other gives you room. The first call came during my lunch break. Unrecognized number, familiar area code. I let it ring through. The second came the next morning, 6:42 a.m., just as I stirred my coffee with a bent spoon. I turned the phone face down on the table. The 3rd time I answered. It's Robert. Not just Robert. There's a bit of a mix-up with the house. The refinance needs your signature. Technically, your name's still there. Technically. I stared at the chipped mug on the table. The one with the faded print of a hummingbird, barely visible now. I'd stopped drinking from it a while ago, but never put it away. It reminded me of things people forget to discard. We thought maybe you could come in. Sign a few things. It's just paperwork. He didn't mention my absence. Didn't ask where I'd been or how Eleanor's service went. Just property. Just steps to move forward. You're part of it after all. On paper. That part stuck. On paper. The way I'd always been included, birthdays, holidays, photos, until it meant work. Until I asked questions. They used to call it family. Now it was process. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit. I heard a faint tapping on his end. Maybe his pen. Maybe impatience. Then I said it slowly. I no longer share a household with people who can't see I exist. There was no protest. Just the familiar hollow gap, like he'd dropped the phone, but not enough to disconnect. I ended the call. Later that night, I received an email. Subject line, urgent. Refinance, deadline. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just attachments and instructions. I didn't open them. I moved the message to a folder I labeled Not Mine. I boiled water in the dented kettle I bought at the thrift store, the one with the red plastic handle burned on one side. I watched the steam rise unevenly. The sound reminded me of someone trying not to cry, more pressure than release. I opened the drawer beside my bed and took out the small notebook with the frayed blue ribbon. The page from last month still held the imprint of what I had written. They don't regret the harm. They regret the loss of control. I wrote a new line underneath. They don't miss me. They miss using me. A text came through as I capped the pen. Logan, the preview said, "Can we talk? Just want to clear the air." Clear the air. As if what hung between us was fog, not fire. I deleted it without reading the rest. 2 days later, a letter arrived in a cream-colored envelope. Return address, Diane Whitman. Slanted cursive on the front, my name intact but estranged. Inside a single card. Generic blank, inside except for one sentence scrawled near the fold. If you want to fix this, start by remembering who you are. No apology, no questions. Just suggestion, like I'd wandered off by mistake, as if it wasn't them who'd drawn the map and moved the boundaries. I folded the card back into its envelope and slid it between 2 pages of my notebook. Not to keep, just to remember what silence can't always hold. That weekend I passed the small flower shop near the bus depot. I stopped. Not for anything grand, just a single stem of eucalyptus pressed flat in a glass bottle. I placed it by the window when I got home. The scent wasn't strong, but it lingered if the air was still. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching the leaves shiver slightly in the breeze. I didn't think about what they wanted anymore, only about what I had once mistaken for belonging. When people say we miss you, they often mean we miss what you gave us. Your time, your labor, your silence. Rarely do they mean you as you are when you're no longer convenient. I read the card again. Remember who you are. And I did. I remembered the night I stayed up threading Eleanor's needles because her hands shook. The time I drove Logan to his court hearing, waiting 3 hours in a plastic chair just so he wouldn't walk in alone. The mornings I texted Dad from deployment, even when he forgot it was me sending them. I remembered every version of myself they were willing to accept, as long as I asked for nothing in return. The kettle hissed again. I poured the water into my old mug and dropped in a cheap tea bag. No sugar. No milk. The string drifted to the side like a quiet refusal. I sipped slowly. Not because it was hot, because I could. Later that night, I blocked the family group chat. Not out of anger, just as someone closes a window when the wind turns sharp. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Eleanor's old friend Mrs. Hawthorne, who still sent me clippings from local newsletters. I just moved forward quietly like a boat untying itself. The next morning I received another message from Robert. No pressure, but time's running out. The bank's waiting. I didn't respond. I opened the recycling bin and dropped the unopened envelope from Diane inside, letting it settle beneath an old grocery flyer for frozen dinners I never bought. When I closed the lid, my hand stayed there for a moment. Not because it was difficult, but because it was final. Sometimes it's not the noise of betrayal that breaks you. It's the silence that follows the wrong kind of return. They didn't come back for me. They came back for access. And this time, I wasn't at the door. I used to think strength came with noise-loud achievements, firm declarations, visible success. Now it sits quietly beside me while I fold laundry. The new place has a window that lets in soft light between 8 and 10 each morning. I noticed that the first week, not because I was looking for beauty, but because I stopped needing to pull the blinds down. The sun no longer felt invasive. It just came and went. I started waking up before the alarm. No particular reason. I'd boil water, stir in the instant coffee, and sit on the floor while it brewed in silence. There's a small fern I bought from a woman at the bus stop. It leans slightly to the left. I don't straighten it. No one texts me anymore. I don't check out of habit. I deleted the group chat thread after my name was mentioned once by accident in a birthday reminder followed by someone saying, "Wait, is she even still around?" I didn't respond. That silence stayed. Carmen brings her lunch to the break room every Thursday. She always has leftovers packed in neat little boxes. That day, I offered her half of a sandwich I'd made the night before, peanut butter and banana, slightly overripe. She smiled and took it without asking what was in it. Between bites, she looked up. "You always seemed like someone who'd disappear when it got loud. But now I think you don't disappear. You just choose where to be seen." I didn't answer right away, just folded the paper napkin I'd been fiddling with and placed it beside the half-empty cup. She nodded as if I had spoken anyway. "Most people fight to be heard. You just don't raise your voice. That's a different kind of strong." I think she meant it kindly. There was no edge, no challenge. I smiled. It was small and voluntary, not the kind you give to be polite, but the one that comes when you realize someone's not trying to fix you. Later that evening, I changed the sheets. Light grey with a faint stitched border. Not expensive, not chosen to impress anyone. Just something soft enough to feel like I picked it for me. There's a notebook on my desk. I don't write much in it, just a line or two each night. Not poetry, not reflection, just fact. Had warm bread at lunch, didn't flinch when I saw Diane's name in the mail queue, wore the green sweater, even though Mom once said it made me look tired. They're not achievements. They're reminders. A few weeks ago, I ran into a woman from my old church. She didn't recognize me at first, then blinked twice and said, "Rachel, I thought you moved away. Diane said you were too busy for family now." I looked at her and said, "That's one version." Then I picked up my groceries and left. She didn't follow. I no longer try to retell the story. The truth I carry doesn't need retelling. It's etched in the way I pause before offering information, in the way I leave rooms quietly, in the way I look at my own reflection without waiting for a second opinion. My name is still on some old documents, property things, school forms. I haven't gone through the trouble of clearing them yet. Not because I can't, because I don't feel the urgency. Those papers can wait. My voice cannot. I saw a photo online the other day, Jessica's baby shower. The caption read, "For generations strong." Eleanor wasn't in the picture. Neither was I. I didn't save the image. I didn't zoom in to see who was holding what. I just looked once, then closed the tab. Sometimes strength is measured in what we don't chase. In the kitchen drawer, I keep a teaspoon with a bent handle. It's from my childhood, used to be part of a mismatched set. Diane used to complain it didn't sit right in the silverware tray. I use it to stir my coffee every morning. It's slightly awkward, but I prefer it now. Familiar things that don't fit perfectly seem more honest. During inventory duty at the base last week, my supervisor offered me a lead role on a new supply chain team. It's not a promotion, just a change. I told her I'd think about it. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I finally have space to decide slowly. I used to rush decisions, afraid someone would accuse me of being indecisive. Now I let the question breathe. I have a keychain with no keys left from the old house. I carry it still not because of nostalgia, but because it reminds me that doors close, and I'm still here. When Carmen asked if I had any family visiting this holiday, I said no. She paused, then offered to split a pie. That was enough. I don't need explanations anymore. I've learned to live in sentences that don't end with permission. Last week I bought a small radio from a thrift store. It plays only 3 stations, all static heavy. I leave it on low while I cook. Sometimes in between the fuzz, a song I forgot I liked slips through. I don't write it down. I just let it play. There's a kind of strength that doesn't make declarations. It folds towels slowly. It returns shopping carts. It writes its name only on things it owns. That's the kind I've learned to keep. Some paperwork doesn't need a second glance once it's signed. I slid the manila envelope across the counter at the clerk's office without adding a return address. The form inside bore only what was necessary: my social security number, the parcel number of the house on Willow Lane, and 1 sentence under reason for withdrawal. I wrote it once slowly without crossing anything out. I decline all claims of ownership and inheritance tied to this property. The woman behind the counter didn't look up. She stamped it twice, filed it into a plastic bin, and moved on to the next number. I didn't ask for a receipt. There's no ceremony in letting go. I walked 3 blocks back to the bus stop, carrying nothing but my phone, and a canvas pouch that held my ID, a pack of gum, and a folded piece of paper from the Social Security office, with 1 new word printed at the top: Brooks. It didn't feel new. It felt returned. The last name had always belonged to the one person who never borrowed me against her expectations. Brooks had no weight of image or reputation, no whispered disappointment attached to the syllables. It was the name on the stitched edge of the quilt I still folded at the foot of my bed. The name on recipes written in fountain pen, some in cursive, so fine it looked like lace. It was the name I wanted on my medical forms, not for nostalgia, but as a quiet border between who I was to them and who I was when no one was watching. I didn't announce the change. There was no group chat to update, no Facebook account left to post from. The HR woman at base raised an eyebrow when I handed her the revised paperwork. "Finally cutting ties," she murmured, not waiting for an answer. I nodded. It was enough. In the weeks that followed, I combed through the drawers in my room. Photographs, clipped corners of birthday cards, my name in 5 different kinds of ink, never once spelled wrong, but rarely spoken aloud. There was 1 photo I paused on. Logan stood between my parents holding a fish he hadn't caught. I was off to the side, cropped out, save for my arm reaching to hold the bucket. A memory that had never belonged to me in the first place. I placed the picture back in the envelope without folding it. The box I used was plain cardboard, not fireproof, not sentimental. I taped it shut with 1 strip labeled the side with black marker "Keep." Do not open unless you're ready to be honest. Then I put it on the highest shelf of the closet. No ritual, no final glance. Some nights I still make tea in the mug Eleanor gave me when I moved into this new place. It's chipped near the handle, stained from too many brews. She used to say, "Anything well used is proof you stayed." I never answered then. Now, I know what she meant. A month ago, I received an email from the family attorney's office. It was templated with bolded legal references and a request for my notarized signature to confirm renunciation of future estate interest. They attached a PDF of the trust document. My name was still there, small boxed in parentheses next to Logan's as if I were optional. I didn't respond. I deleted it without opening the attachment. The next week, a voicemail came. My mother's voice thinned out at the edges. "Rachel, this doesn't have to be so permanent. You're making things harder than they need to be." I didn't listen to the rest. I saved the audio file into a folder labeled Echoes. I don't delete them anymore. I let them exist unplayed. One Saturday I stopped by the notary service near the laundromat. I brought only one document, the one for my new name. The woman who signed it didn't flinch. She didn't ask if it was for marriage or divorce or anything in between. When she handed it back, she looked me in the eye and said, "Whatever the reason, make sure it fits better than what came before." It does. I don't celebrate any of this. There's no joy in erasure, even when you choose it, but there's peace in alignment. I open my mailbox now and see letters addressed to Ms. Rachel Brooks. No one knows where that name came from except me, and that's how I want it. Sometimes I wonder if they notice the absence. At holidays when one chair stays pushed in, or when the group photos balance too evenly. Maybe someone looks toward the door just for a second. But no one has reached out since the day I declined the paperwork. Not even Logan. I think that's just the clearest confirmation of all. Eleanor once told me during a walk around the lake, there's a kind of strength in silence, but even stronger is knowing when to stop waiting for the noise. She gave me a ring the same day. It wasn't fancy, just a silver band with a slight bend where it had caught on a cabinet handle years before. She wore it on her pinky. I keep it now in a small dish near my keys. Not on display, but not hidden either. When I changed my name, I used her ring as my signature symbol. Pressed it into the wax seal of the envelope I sent the notary. No one would know but me. I don't write these things down to be remembered. I write them so I don't forget who I became without their applause. I've already returned everything they expected of me. The rest I keep, not to carry, but to understand. And what I've chosen not to return is mine now. I used to believe that surviving meant keeping score of the hurts, the betrayals, the quiet rooms, and the unopened envelopes. But now it feels more like wiping down a countertop after cooking, not out of bitterness, just habit. The kettle clicked off with a soft pop. I poured the ginger tea into the same white mug I'd been using all week. The rim was faintly chipped, a crescent missing from the glaze. I liked how the crack softened the heat against my lips. It reminded me nothing was untouched, and nothing needed to be. I no longer check my phone before I stand. No scrolling through old thread. No lingering glances at unread names. The messages that used to tether me tight, invisible cords have loosened. Some still tug on occasion out of memory, not meaning. At the bottom of my drawer is a paper folder held together with a rusted binder clip. I didn't need to open it. I knew what was inside. The final letter from my mother, never unsealed. A printed apology from Logan, 3 lines in Arial signed with his initials, as if he couldn't bring himself to write my name. And the court document confirming my name change to Rachel Brooks. Each page slept in silence. I let them. When I stepped outside that morning, the air didn't ask questions. The sky stretched without expectation. On the corner, a woman I'd never met was wrestling with 2 grocery bags and a stubborn zipper on her coat. Her elbow trembled as she tried to hold both. I didn't think. I just moved. She glanced at me when I reached for one of the bags. Her eyes were soft and lined, but not sharp like the eyes I grew up with. "Thank you. You're kind." I nodded. Not because I was kind, but because kindness doesn't require a title. I carried her groceries to the bus bench and left before she could ask anything more. Back at my apartment, the sun reached across the laminate floor like it had been waiting all week. I sat with my tea and opened the draft I'd been working on, a personal essay about silence. Not the awkward kind that begs to be filled, but the kind that heals, that hides, that holds. Halfway down the page in the margin I had written, "Silence is not absence. It's how some of us breathe when noise becomes a weapon." I remembered my father's voice, not the words, just the tone when he last called. Must have been a mix-up on those documents. "Anyway, your whole name's still on the mortgage papers. If you could just—" He hadn't used my name until the end of the sentence. Like I was paperwork. Like my presence existed only in terms of what could be processed, notarized, leveraged. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why he called after a year of nothing. I said one thing. I no longer belong to people who forget I exist until I'm needed. And then I blocked the number. That conversation didn't echo. It didn't cling. It settled like dust on the windowsill and stayed there. I didn't need to clean it. I just let it be. My favorite part of the new apartment was the window. Not large, not picturesque, but the light was real. I bought a small plant and named it Nothing. It sat on the sill and leaned toward the sun without performance. Just because it could. The people at work noticed something different. "You smile more," Carmen had said once, without looking up from her report. "But it's not for anyone. That's rare." I smiled again quietly to myself. I started stretching in the mornings. Not to lose weight, not to be admired, just to feel where my body ended and the air began. I no longer wrote to be read. My notebook was filled with fragments. I am no one's mirror. There is peace in not explaining. Love without dignity isn't love. It's control. I mailed the final legal documents last week. Property disclaimers, name withdrawal from shared accounts. I used a black ink pen that Eleanor once gave me with the gold cap and slow-drying ink. The cap clicked in place with a weight I trusted. I signed every form without hesitation. No copies sent. No emails CC'd. That afternoon I boxed up the last photo albums, the ones where my face looked like I was trying to earn something. I didn't rip them. I didn't burn them. I placed them inside a storage bin, sealed it, and slid it into the top of the closet, high enough to forget, low enough to not stumble on. When Carmen asked what I was doing over the weekend, I answered, "Nothing." "I need to be applauded for." She raised her brow and laughed, but I didn't join her. "Survival is not dramatic. It's the laundry done before it piles up. It's locking your own door and knowing no one else has a key. It's buying the food you like without asking if anyone else minds the taste. The letters are still in the drawer. The inbox still has messages I haven't touched, but they no longer glow like they once did. They no longer hum in the background like low-grade fever. I don't wait for their voices. I no longer need to prove I was right. I just live. And when the tea cools, I drink it anyway. Not everything has to be perfect to be enough.